Welcome back to the Blackletter Podcast. We set out to create an entertaining and exciting podcast about law and business. Blackletter, the name, comes from the Gothic typeset. Over time, Blackletter became the only font that English law books were printed in. It made it harder for kind of the common person to understand what the English law books said. Blackletter came to represent something that was law, that was set in stone, that was sort of old and a well-settled fundamental principle of law. We're here to demystify black-letter law. We're here to demystify things that happen in business and law and where those two meet. And I hope you have fun listening. Tell us background-wise a little bit about the contracts you have. I know some contracts with NASA. You have something with the French government. You have satellites from all over the... Yeah. Tell us about that a little bit. What you can tell us.
Yeah.
I know some stuff you can't tell us because...
We have a lot of confidentiality clauses.
Confidentiality stuff and ITAR and export laws and all that stuff.
Most of our work is in open science and open data. So for the government, the NASA, NOAA, USGS work, that's all satellites that are pointed at the Earth, and that data is available free for download for anyone, anywhere, including like everybody.
Even me.
Even you.
Yeah.
It's an extremely powerful multi-billion-dollar asset that our government has that I think is underutilized, and a lot of it's very difficult data to work with, which is good for our business, but not necessarily good for like the world.
Right.
So a lot of our work is to take that free resource and deploy it in ways that people can use it to make decisions, like everything from where to put wells. We have customers who've done that, how to deal with water resources, how to manage forests and emergency response and, everything in between.
So you don't have to have the expertise in these specific fields, just in how to provide the data for them in an understandable format.
Yeah, a lot of our customers are the ones who have the expertise in the fields, and,
Gotcha.
And we're sort of trying to figure out how to help them.
So do you think, and I know this is an off-the-wall question, I just thought of it, but do you think that artificial intelligence is going to change, enhance, maybe...
That is so funny. I just had somebody ask me about that last week.
I mean, of course. You have to, especially when you say, hey, we're translating something complicated into data. The first thing that I think is there's this boom in AI, and it seems like it's a field that might be ripe for that.
We have a machine learning team, so
okay.
we're
so you're
going
on top
down
of
that
it.
field.
You're on top
down
of
that road.
Yeah.
You have to, one of the big things that people want to use satellite data for is change detection.
Okay.
And, seeing what's happened over time. And that's like ripe for automation because you have...
Right.
I mean,
because it's massive sets of data.
It's massive and it's repetitive. And having a human in the loop is a thing that people do, but it's challenging to make that efficient, to say the least. I mean, in some cases, we've got data sets. The Landsat program goes back to the early 70s. So you've got like decades of data.
Of petabytes, I guess.
Yep, yeah, petabytes of data. And it can be applied to all kinds of problems. And truthfully, I think it's being underapplied right now. And because there's a lot of groups that it's too impermeable to get to, and they've got their systems and they're going to stick with what they've done.
And then you decided, this is the life for me, I'm going to do this forever. Or not exactly.
Not exactly. So then I woke up one morning and I asked myself, is this what I want to do between now and when I'm dead? And I said, no, it's not. I'm really passionate about soldier fuel. And I thought to myself, here's my best friend who created the soldier fuel energy bars and the brand, and had been selling it to various allies of ours and such around the world.
Right.
Even Los Angeles County Fire Department.
So these are the bars, and I talked to you about this before offline. Yeah. When I was in the Army, they were called Hua bars.
Yes.
And the Army was giving them to us.
Yes.
And I think they were different than your bars.
Yes.
They were not good tasting bars.
And they had a lot of saturated fats in them too.
Yeah. So I do remember Hua bars, and if were in the Army a long time ago, think Clinton administration like I was, you would have had a Hua bar maybe. So that's this bar. That's you guys. But it's better now.
Yes, we completely improved it, redesigned it. And I thought to myself, gosh, I've eaten several thousands of these bars that my best friend's company had been making. And I thought, well, I turned my farm into something extraordinary. I love that brand, Soldier Fuel. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, instead of eating the bars and always buying them, why don't I own the brand, own the company?
Fair.
So I spoke with my friend, and we decided to combine forces and to take it up to a much higher level. So that's when we created Soldier Fuel Energy Drink as well, to see if anybody was interested.
And if you can't see it if you're listening, but Aleko is drinking a bottle of Soldier Fuel Energy Drink. He loves this stuff.
So good.
And it's got a Black Hawk with some fast roping down the front.
So good.
So that's how we came to Soldier Fuel and Go Pills. So that, folks, that's Aleko's background. Very simple. The son of a matador and Swedish showgirl who emigrated to Washington, D.C., then became a real estate developer, MBA Georgetown Law School, went to Los Angeles.
Yep.
Entertainment, did a couple seasons of a television program for the Weather Channel, tech company, and then thoroughbred breeding farm to Soldier Fuel. It all makes sense.
It all makes sense.
It all makes sense. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into patent monetization. And frankly, since a lot of our listeners don't know, what is patent monetization?
Was not thrilled with practicing law. I was a little bit bored with it. And it seemed to me that I was doing all the work and my clients were having all the fun. So I thought I'd take a shot, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I thought at my age then, which was, I guess, mid-40s type of age, if I was going to do it, I better do it then or not at all. It's pretty hard to walk away from a partnership in a major firm because you have, a lot of financial security and you don't have to worry where, your next check is coming from. I took the leap. I left the firm and I tried a couple of things that didn't work out, but they were good learning experiences. I really think you have to fail before you succeed, and you learn as much from or more from failure as you do from success.
You've kind of been all of the places, right? You've been in the government side, in alphabet soup agencies, or at least the Central Intelligence Agency. You've been on the government side in the military. You've been in the private sector as inside counsel, in-house counsel. And then you've served as outside counsel in a private law firm like you do now, kind of wrapping all that experience up. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, how you take these experiences and use them for your clients' benefit.
Sure. Well, I practice a lot inside government contracts and cybersecurity and technology transactions. And the way I bring my business experience in is a lot about contract management and streamlining. So the U.S. government is increasing its compliant initiatives twofold every single day. And as every government contractor knows, there's a million things you have to comply with. And how do you know what they are and how to comply with all of them? So that's really where I try to focus and help companies on everything from compliance with the FAR, the DFAR, as well as some of the cybersecurity standards. And I find that most of my companies work in and around the government space.
People would say maybe, driving, learning how to drive, or your first girlfriend, or getting married, or having kids. But really, it was the loss of my father that really changed my life. And we had a good experience insofar as we had time together. We found out that he was going to die in about 6 months, or that's what he was told. It ended up being about 3 years. So we had plenty of time to make arrangements. And even though it was very sad, my dad was surrounded by loved ones, and it seemed like a very peaceful way to pass. And all of the people around him had helped him coordinate end-of-life care, but he had helped coordinate the passing on of his assets. And so one thing that he did was he'd write little notes to us, organizing, here's the combination to this safe, and here's the trick with this car and how to drive the car, or here you can find the keys to the the locks here, and just those little post-it notes, all these little organizational memos from my dad were messages directly from my dad. So I got to hear his words and be reminded of his spirit even after he was gone. So even though I was totally devastated, as most people are when they lose their parents, I laid in bed for a week or so, and really wasn't able to get my wits about me. He was there with me in spirit by the writings that he had put down. Even though they hadn't been drafted by an attorney necessarily, he had spent time looking at the possibility of death, and really it wasn't just a possibility, it's inevitable, and planning for it and making sure that he was creating or causing positive change through his death. And that's really what I mean by death positivity.
So that's super interesting. So tell me, how did that drive you to estate planning? And how does that relate to, I guess, other things that have happened in your life that kind of create the backdrop for you and what you do that's unique in the estate planning world?
Yeah, the loss of my father and his efforts to plan for his death, and the people who surrounded him. You know, my mom, who was his ex-wife, also helped him plan to pass on the assets and to put things in writing and to have conversations with his heirs about, you know, what their expectations are, how they would interact with each other. You know, we weren't going to fight over assets, so how do we talk about it? How do we feel fair? But really, I think that experience gave me a sense of compassion, so that when I'm talking to people about their own end of life, I have the experience of talking with my dad, you know, sitting quietly. It's not necessarily a magical or fun conversation. It's often a slow, thoughtful time where you're just kind of sitting, contemplating, and so I have a business. What's going to happen to the business, right? And then you have to sort of go through how to wind down a business, or, you know, I have these kids and one of them's estranged, and how do I get them to relate to each other? It's a very complicated, thorough conversation, and the relationship that I had with my dad during those last 3 years gave me the patience and compassion to just sit and listen to people during these, you know, sometimes challenging discussions. A lot of people come to me for these topics in scarcity. They come with, you know, either feeling scarcity of time for themselves, that they don't have time to do what it is that they want to do, or scarcity of money or their loved ones, where they're like, geez, you know, I don't know if I'm going to have enough money to provide for my kids. And we can kind of talk it through of, okay, well, did you designate beneficiaries to all of your accounts? You know, have you thought about how to pass on any of the assets like cars, trucks, or, you know, maybe you can maximize the value now by finding collectors who are interested in these assets that you may not want to pass on to your kids, because if they don't want them, don't bother passing it on. And then I had the good fortune of just going into work for a law firm that really focused on estate planning. They had only been doing estate planning for the most part for over 100 years. I ended up learning under their mentorship, and so got a lot of really great experience with average estate sizes and even legacy planning, some of the complexities of trust, and definitely the business transition planning. I think that's one of the blind spots for a lot of people. Business people often kind of hero their way through things, and we can't hero our way through death. So the transition planning is really critical for business owners, who often end up being a lot of my clients.
Tell us your lessons learned, because that's what I'm most excited about. Okay. And most interested in through all of these trials and travails you've had, and they're hard lessons. So
hard lessons. One, just get it out there. Mm-hmm. You've got a product and you've got an idea. Don't talk about it, do it.
Okay.
Just don't talk about it. Just get it done.
So execution.
And you know what?
Pull the trigger, as we used to say.
That tech company with which I was involved, a dear friend of mine, he wanted things to be perfect.
Right.
You know what? We don't have time to be perfect. Get it out there and you improve it.
Yep.
Get it out there and you improve it. So that's lesson number one.
Okay.
I think lesson number two that I've really seen recently, and that is goodwill.
Okay.
Versus merit.
Okay.
If you'd asked me 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I would have said, you know what? Hard work, a great product, that's going to prevail. No, that's not true. You need people around you who want to see you win, who want to see you succeed.
So you're talking about inside of your company, your partners, your business, and outside your companies. So promoters and partners.
Nothing happens on its own.
Okay.
And again, hard work and merit, you just disappear into your little office, and that's it. Take example, being on this show today.
Right.
You and I have goodwill with each other.
Okay.
If I was in my office all the time, just working really hard, developing a great product, I wouldn't be on the show. You and I met each other. We like each other. Now the Ukrainian Special Forces, as of this week, have soldier fuel arriving there.
Getting ready to beat those Russians back?
Yeah, it's a 500 special operators. We were on the phone with them with a translator last week.
Fantastic.
And the reason that happened is because I met two guys who were political refugees from the Soviet Union. We liked each other. We got along really well. So they made a couple of phone calls, and now the Ukraine Special Forces have soldier fuel.
So this advice is you've got to get out there to make things happen.
You've got to get out there to make things happen.
Okay.
And, if there's something that maybe you're tired and you don't really feel like going to a special event, so what? Go anyway.
Have a soldier fuel, and you'll feel like going.
But definitely, you have to have people who want to see you win.
Okay.
And I think that goes back to, just be nice to people.
Okay.
Just be nice to people.
Something that everyone is going to be curious about listening to this death on death or death positivity is a constant conversation that I have after speaking to thousands of people. Everybody wants to know, do I need a living trust or do I need a will? And I have 5 tests. And in these tests, you're going to hear some of those war stories. So number 1, do you have real property or property outside of your home state? So this is where, hey, parents own a vacation timeshare somewhere, or they own a retirement house in Arizona, or they have mineral rights in South Dakota. Well, anytime there's property outside of your home state, you probably need to consider a living trust. So I'm just going to keep going through the checklist of basically the five issues. Other attorneys might have a different list. This is my list. Number 2, if you're over the estate tax threshold, the federal estate tax threshold is over 12 million, so it's pretty high. But in 2025, it's expected to be about 50% lower. So while this might not be a major issue federally right now, it may drop in 2025. And then also you want to be aware of your state's estate tax threshold. I'm not going to mention Washington because I'm sure you're going to have people listening from all over the world. But if your assets or your net worth, including life insurance, exceeds the estate tax threshold, you definitely want to consider a living trust or a trust inside your will. If you have a spouse, you can often have a spousal credit shelter trust. And then there's a bunch of technical terms, Q-tips, etc., to protect your assets or your heirs from the estate tax. Right now, if the estate tax applies, the federal gift and estate tax is about 40% for amounts over the threshold, or they also just increased the gift tax exclusion to $17,000 per person. So again, if your net worth exceeds that amount, and if you're a married couple, you want to take your total combined net worth and divide by 2 to find each person's individual net worth. If it exceeds the estate tax threshold, you're definitely going to want to consider a living trust. Number 3 is one of the more interesting questions for me, and that's whether or not you have permanent dependents. Usually that's going to be children, special needs children. Sometimes it's people with addiction issues, heirs that have control issues over their money, or maybe they've got dementia. In those situations, you do want to talk about a special needs trust or a spendthrift trust, some sort of living trust that you'd create for their benefit past your lifetime. And that's really fun because we get to sit and talk about how to care for a loved one and what their special needs might be and who the right trustee is to care for them and if they need a guardian, all those sorts of things. So that's really important. The next one is if you have heirs who are non-U.S. citizens, we really want to talk about a qualified domestic trust because there's an expatriation tax that can apply and really kind of surprise people by taking away a large portion of their inheritance. If they're non-U.S. citizens, we just easily draft a trust that has a trustee that's a U.S. person or entity to avoid the expatriation tax. And then the last one is the hardest one. I kind of already mentioned it. That's where you have a mixed marriage or children from outside of the marriage. Those surprise children really want to be planned for inside of your estate plan. And sometimes it's a very difficult conversation to have. And you can really watch out for some of those troubles by talking about a trust, particularly if you have a husband with children and a wife with children, the children in common. Each person who passes away is going to be disposing of half of the marital community, and each of the children is going to expect to inherit from it.
So you have living trusts, you have Q dots, grats, crats, slats, special SNTs,
Eyelets.
all eyelets, insurance trusts. Sure. So there's all kinds of things. The short story is the best strategy is to talk to an attorney about this and figure out what you need. And it's very circumstance specific. That's kind of what I'm drawing away from what you're saying.
Unfortunately, in this business, there are a fair number of people who go around with patents that aren't particularly good patents, who are asserting them hoping to just get a settlement. You want to avoid that, because that's just not the way to approach it. I mean, you want to be comfortable that you have a valid patent that's infringed. Do your homework if you're able to understand it yourself, and if you're not, hire an attorney that understands patent law and the technology that's involved. You have to understand both in order to really assess the patent. And sometimes, you have to get an expert. I've dealt with, over the years, many experts in particular areas. I mean, you're not going to find any one patent attorney who understands every technical area, because it's just too hard. So sometimes you have to go out and find an expert, a consultant who can say, well, I understand this field, and this is the way these products work. And some of these products are, really like black boxes. You really don't know how they work. It's really hard to, particularly in the computer areas. It's hard to.
AI patents, right? Those are literal black boxes. Even the developers don't know what goes on inside.
To parse these things out and figure out exactly how they work is very, very difficult. But, I guess advice number one is get a good attorney. Do your homework, get a good attorney. So now you're this good attorney. The second thing is, it's always good to have multiple patents. If you're really asserting them against an infringer, you don't want to have to rely on one claim of one patent. It's just like going hunting with one bullet in your gun. Okay, you want to have a 6-shooter, or something like that. You want to have a bunch of different patents if you have them, or at least a patent with a lot of different claims. And the other thing you want is ideally to have a continuation on file, so that as you learn more about how products work, assuming that your written description covers it, you can add claims to your patent, and you can have new patents issued that have additional claims that might apply to developments in the technology. So that's my second piece of advice, is to make sure that you have sufficient claims or patents that cover the particular products involved, and ideally have a continuation on file, so you can have new patents issue as products develop. So my third piece of advice is, if you're prosecuting a patent, if you're in the stage where you've got a pending application, you're trying to get a patent issued, and you have, usually you have a prosecution attorney who's handling it. But I find that, and particularly when I went to enforce patents, it was very frustrating to me that the people who wrote the claims were largely ignorant of the English language. I'm putting it in a nice way. They would write claims that maybe an engineer understood, but that the average person couldn't figure out what they're saying. And at the end of the day, when you enforce these patents, you're going to be, if you get to a jury trial, you're going to have a jury of people who are not technical people or lawyers. They're going to be, people who work at banks and postmen, and the guy down who works down the block from you. They're going to be people like you
don't have to explain it to them,
and you got to explain it. If the language of the claim is so convoluted, and the sentences are like page after page without punctuation, and it's written in engineering language, it's really hard to explain this stuff. And then you have to get into claim construction. You have to hire people to come in to tell the jury what these words mean, what these sentences mean. And if there's any way at all you can write these claims in plain English without using highly technical terms, do it.
So much the better.
So much. It makes your life a lot easier, right?
Tony, what is a plaintiff's favorite sentence at a Markman hearing in claim construction. I think it's plain and ordinary meaning. I think that's like every case I've ever done on the P side of a patent case.
Right.
We want plain and ordinary meaning, and the defense always wants a very technical description of what the claim is. So I think that speaks to everything you said.
I mean, I would get involved in my, particularly when I had patents with continuations, I would get involved in the pending applications. I would actually write some of the claims because I was not happy with what I would read the claim and say, I don't understand this. I mean, I'm not a technical person, but I've been doing this a while. I don't understand this claim. I don't understand what this says. And I would rewrite it in a way that I understood. And I figured, okay, I'm not a tech. I was a French lit major. So if I can understand this, then, the average guy in the jury is going to understand it. And if I can't understand it, then the judge sure isn't going to understand it, because he's not a technical person. So that's my third piece of advice.
So if I were to summarize then, first piece of advice is do your homework and get a good lawyer. Kind of hand in hand. First piece of advice is get the background right. Second piece of advice is that you've got to understand what it is to have a good patent. That it's not obvious, that there isn't prior art, that you have more than one claim, that you have multiple patents. Don't go hunting with one bull, right? Make sure that you've got a strong and lots of ammunition so that you can be successful in the field of hunting, I guess, in the field of prosecuting or pushing forward, asserting patents. And then your third piece of advice was make sure, if you can, and this precedes everything else, that your patent is written in such a way that it's easy to understand. I think it's hard if you already are stuck with patents, you're stuck with what you're stuck with, but maybe in your continuation, or maybe as you think about it as an inventor and you read what a patent attorney sent you and say, wow, I'm the inventor, this is confusing to me. Yeah. And you need to go back to your patent attorney and say, hey, this needs to be understandable. So I think that those are great 3 pieces of advice.
That's all for today's episode of Blackletter. Thanks again for listening. Join us next time when we talk about more Blackletter issues in creative ways. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and check out our website at blackletterstudios.com.